Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show. This is a special lockdown edition for you folks, and I walked back after going and grabbing myself a beer to hear the boys talking about bodily fluids. So I'm a little bit worried as to how this one might go this evening. It could go all over the shop, but we put a tweet out, or I put a tweet out, and got a whole bunch of questions on Twitter. I also put a message out on Facebook and also on actually I'm not sure I did Facebook actually, but I did do YouTube as well. So we'll bring you those. That will provide the kind of basis for our discussions. And joining me this evening, first off, I've got Boa. How you doing, sir?
Very well. Kia ora, everyone. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is safe. Level 4 lockdown, version 3.1, I believe. Yes. Good to be back on the show, and I hope all our fans out there are tuning in nice and safe. Let's do this right. Let's do this quick, and let's get out of lockdown.
Absolutely. And also joining me is Stephen Harris. How are you doing, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Paul. And just want to really concur with what Boa had just has said as well. Just, wherever you are, be safe out there. Please do the right thing. I mean, to say, as per the news tonight, see some people still, I can't believe it, trying to travel out of Auckland or just breaking curfew. And I mean, to say that, yeah, exactly it. For us to get through this, we need everybody doing the right thing, and this is not the time to decide that you should shoot off to your holiday batch or basically you should shoot away to see families. But at this stage, I will say my thoughts do go out to those who have lost a loved one. I had a very good friend who lost his brother on Monday, and I couldn't imagine what they're going through at this point in time. And sometimes sport all becomes a bit irrelevant, fellas.
Yeah, it does. Look, folks, it's okay not to be okay. It's one of the messages I said that I was going to put the boys that I'll do at the beginning of the show, because look, I'm still in my pajamas. Not had a great day today because I'm spent the day sleeping, but it's okay not to be okay, folks. Be kind to yourselves. You will have good days and bad days, so don't be harsh on yourself, and we'll get through this one absolutely fine and come out the other side. And then also, obviously, get vaccinated as well. So I'll be looking at. So I've registered to get my. I've not actually got a date, but I have registered on the vaccination thing. I'll be trying to get a date soon on that one. I see you got a nice green and white mug this evening. What are you drinking there, Stephen?
I've got a nice green tea at the minute. Just
green tea, very healthy.
Just with a sore throat. Just trying to avoid any dairy products at this stage, fellas.
And Boa, how you? What's your tipple this evening?
The working man's beer, the blue collar working man's beer, Line Red, greatest beer probably on planet Earth.
There we go. Had to do that as I got my working man blue collar. There you go. That's Boa for you.
I tell you what, Boa has gone up in my estimation. Big time, because also a long-time sponsor of Northland Rugby as well, and it's a case of there's only one beer we drink up here, mate.
Yep, it's a real working man's. The people who have rough hands always drink Line Red, and you can really enjoy it. I mean, I've had a very long, exhaustive. Physical day out there, so I'm really soaking it in and enjoying the company as well as the beer.
Everything else is an imitation, trust me.
So this weekend, folks, what was supposed to be happening was I was supposed to be going up to North Harbour and watching the Farah Palmer Cup game. Stephen was going to join me for the NPC game on Friday evening. I was then going to head down to Waikato, where we'd have the Thames Valley's opening game of the Heartland Championship at FMG Stadium, followed by Waikato versus Wellington in the Farah Palmer Cup and the NPC. Then I was going to drive back up to Auckland, get a lift with Stephen up to Northland for their NPC game as well. So I had 6 games lined up this weekend, all of which have been postponed. So so sorry, folks, no post-match interviews coming to you this weekend. But we were planning on doing that mass on that. But unfortunately, not to be. So let's just dive into some of the questions then from that we got on Twitter. Peter Blackman asked us, is Warren Gatland too Northern Hemisphere influenced to be successful in Super Rugby? Oh, let's be it. So last year, the Chiefs 2 years ago, Warren Gatland had a good start with the Chiefs, didn't he? And then it all fell apart during lockdown. After lockdown, they didn't win a game in, I think it was in Super Rugby Aotearoa, the first edition, and then in the second edition, obviously with Clayton McMillan in charge, did much better this year, including making a final as well. So, boys, what's the difference that Warren Gatland got it wrong, and Clayton McMillan, with his more recent Kiwi background experience with the Maori All Blacks and with Bay of Plenty, knew how to play the right style? What's your thoughts, Bo?
Yeah, look, coaching at this level, it's all about understanding your cattle, the players, the resources you have at your disposal, understanding what their skill set, and then coming up with a game plan which is appropriate. So there's a good old saying, good old proverb, when you've been in some place too long, you are that place. And I think that's what Warren Gatland sort of he's kind of subscribed to that, where he's based himself in the Northern Hemisphere last few seasons, and it's a huge challenge trying to juggle.
Last few seasons, he's been up there for probably about 20 years. I mean, not last few seasons, he's been there a long time.
It's been there a long time. Yeah, that's right. All right, so few seasons, 20 years. So look, the reality is, particularly what he's done with the Lions, he came up with a game plan based on the resources, the players' skills at his disposal. So, from a coaching point of view, you can't really blame him too much at all, because, realistically, the Lions were, one, maybe two penalty kicks away from actually winning the series, albeit a very boring series where both teams played very similar styles of rugby. That being said, given that he's a Kiwi and New Zealander, he could have very easily decided to go the other way. And that's probably a mistake he made in hindsight, particularly in that last test, because they continued in the same way. And I recall listening to an interview with Sir Graham Henry, where he said, look, unless the Lions change their style, and if they keep playing the same way, it's going to be a win for the Springboks. So I think what it comes down to is understanding the players, the player profiles, the skill set you have, and drawing up a game plan which is appropriate to those players. And end of the day, if you don't have players you believe that can deliver something beyond that, it's never going to happen. So I don't blame him too much. He's probably a victim of his own circumstances and probably a byproduct of his own environment.
Stephen, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, yes, it's an interesting one. I know players who move different hemispheres sometimes struggle to get used to the style or pattern of game. Somebody like Aaron Cruden is a classic example of a player who went north and didn't quite capture that Northern Hemisphere style, but immediately came back to New Zealand rugby and kind of looked like he hadn't left. I think it's probably going to take Warren Gatland it's been a while since he's been coaching in New Zealand, and the style of the New Zealand game, if you probably saw a Super Rugby game from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, the changes have been huge across the board. And I suppose where he's been up in Wales, no question he's loyal, and you saw that in the the selection of the Lions team, where quite often he'd sort of, you think back to hindsight's a wonderful thing, but maybe the adventurous Finn Russell may have been a better option than Dan Biggar with the kicking game. But I just think it's taken him a while to bed in. He's got to get used to the players. Players have got to get used to him. So, without even giving you a proper answer to the original question that was asked, it's probably going to take him a little bit to sort of find his feet. Having met Warren, yeah, it just strikes me as a person that's a little bit more insular, if that's the word for it. I don't think he gives sort of guy who actually gives away too much. Not that most coaches do give away a lot, But yeah, hey, I think he is a good coach, and he's more than capable of doing good in this country.
It's interesting. I'm just looking at his record, and he did 3 years at Thames Valley as an assistant. Went off to Europe. That they left in '96. Came back to Waikato for 3 years, 2005 to 2007, and then went off again. So apart from 1 year as or a bit of work as a technical advisor for the Chiefs during that time in 2006, 2007, he really hasn't actually. This Chiefs bit is his first time at Super Rugby level, which is a kind of a bit of a surprise to someone who's coached three British and Irish Lions tours, Ireland and Wales, as well as teams in the Pro 14 or what became the Pro 14 anyway, and also the Gallagher Premiership. It's quite a. I was a bit surprised to see how little Super Rugby he's done. So yeah.
One thing I have to say is with Warren, with his attack shapes, it's going to be a bit technical here from a coaching point of view. He's not a big fan of attacking first, second face out wide. He wants to keep things very conservative. And I think that's largely that Northern Hemisphere influence, and also tend to play a lot from the 10, particularly kicking the ball out of hand. So when you come into Super Rugby, where you have slightly different, player skill sets, particularly with your back three and outside backs having real good speed and ability to step in, use those angles, you've really got to utilize it. And if we were to look at what he did with Super Rugby in his recent stint, because he probably didn't do that as much, and margins are so fine, that's probably where he struggles. So that's one area he's probably going to have to repatriate himself if he is going to look at come back to the Southern Hemisphere and do some coaching. But just looking at most of the attack patterns with what the Lions do, what Wales did, he's very traditional, very conventional in that sense. And without being too unkind to the man, he's not the greatest innovator when it comes to pushing the ball out wide.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because he comes back and we'll have Clayton McMillan as his assistant coach next year. So it'll be interesting to see how they work together and how things go after that as well. So it'll be interesting to see how much he changes things from what Clayton's been doing in that one. I guess so. I'll go yes. He probably is perhaps too Northern Hemisphere influenced, but we'll see if what he's been doing is because of the cattle and whether it will change with the cattle he gets down south. I mean, he is clearly a classic one. Hayden Murray says so I said, what do you like to discuss? And he says mullets. Seriously, what is going on with New Zealand rugby players? I mean, they just seem to be. Somebody put up a picture that said there the score was X, and if you counted all the points scored by people with mullets, it was the exact same score for the All Blacks against Wallabies. Oh dear, seriously. I'm too old, and you guys aren't exactly young either. So sorry, folks. We probably don't have the fashion input, but I don't know, Bo, have you got any feedback from Manukau Rovers and the boys there as to what this whole mullet thing is all about?
No, I have to say most of our most of my players at Rovers in Southside, our demographic doesn't necessarily tend to correlate too much with the mullet. It's mostly my style of hair, which is no hair.
I mean, come on, look, I mean, the picture that they're using for that score shows Sever Reese and Richie Mwanga with mullet. So look, it's not like it's just kind of white country hunting boys, is it? And it's across the, because it used to. I mean, obviously, we've had Jack Goodhue doing it before, and it kind of was more kind of European, Kiwi kind of, or Pakeha kind of thing, rather than necessarily a. Or maybe I'm wrong here. I'm coming, but it felt like more of a Pakeha style, but now it seems to have gone across all the players. I mean, Stephen would probably be able to.
It was more Eurosexual, like metrosexual, Eurosexual. Well, one thing I have to say is, Samson and Delilah. If you remember Samson, his power came from the hair. And if you look at Damien McKenzie, it wasn't quite quite the mullet you
Getting there, though. He's
associate.
trying.
It's trying hard, but based on 2 steps and giving it almost 60 meters straight over the crossbar, maybe there's a bit of correlation. So without actually doing a proper scientific research, we cannot conclusively say there is some kind of correlation. But hey, maybe this is something for NZR high performance to really have to think about.
I was going to say, guys, I think I can recall England international Joe Marler, who plays for Harlequins. I can remember him sporting a Tom, what is it, a mohawk, beg your pardon, and that had all sorts of colours. So yeah, this is just, and I think this is just a case of guys showing their individualism. Of course, we saw Joe Webber at the Olympics in Tokyo with the New Zealand Sevens team. The problem is when you have a haircut like that and you stand and you're having a bad game, I think your haircut probably stands out just as much as as the game that you're playing. And of course, we know Fulao Whakatava, as you can see, he's already got a fan already. Decided to sport the same haircut at that age. I don't know how he got away with it with his parents, but listen, I just think it's an individual thing. And I know there's a lot of talk about a lot of people who are old school will talk about haircuts and what have you, but I still look at what players do what they do on the field, regardless of the haircut. But I must admit, when you are having a bad one, there's always the train of thought to go, hey, maybe he's spending more time on his hair.
It seems to be en masse now for within Super Rugby. Simon here says, mullets not a thing in Europe. No, absolutely they're not. What I'm saying is it's the Pakeha or the it seems to be a deep South redneck thing in the States as well. It's definitely, but it seems to be more of a culturally. How do I say without being racist? It was more a white guy's thing rather than an Islander thing. But I say it seems to be that the Islanders Maoris now are getting more into it as well. Aaron Smith, now he's one of the ones that's actually got a decent haircut, and he is actually, he has been trained as a barber as well. So yes, he should get them in the chair and give them a proper cut. But Whakatava's not the only one that's doing that whole bleachy thing of the party piece at the back there. There's a couple of others who are doing it to a lesser extent. But look, at the end of the day, folks, how long does it change to get you to get yourself to a good haircut from a bad haircut? It just takes half an hour, right? If you get yourself a silly tattoo, it's with you for life. So if you're going to play around and do something silly, do it with your hair, not with tattoos. These guys can have fun.
Well, in America, mullets are mostly sported, particularly down south. Guys wearing camouflage who brew moonshiners, yeah. So it's a weird thing, but at the same time, you have to understand with some of these new age players, particularly the professional players, they have big followings on social media, and it's a mark of kind of differentiating themselves with everyone else. So there's more to it. Maybe it's a marketing tool. Maybe just getting more likes, more followers, and all this eventually will turn into cash. So who knows? Maybe there's a bigger picture most of us older blokes can't actually see.
Yep, it's all. I say it's if you're going to mess around and do something individual, and look, their business, their job doesn't require a smart haircut, so they can do whatever they like, and it's all good fun. I think Kevin Peterson in cricket used to get a lot of flack for his. It's like, look, hey, why not? It's if you can do it. Richard Bishop then says, will the championship games be impacted, Paul? In response to this, our lockdown show. So, look, with our lockdown here in New Zealand. What I initially thought was that all the games would be happening. Actually, sorry. Perhaps they all have moonshine businesses outside of rugby activities. Look, in New Zealand, having a still is legal, so it's not moonshine. It's not illegal. Whereas in the States, it's illegal. So here you can have your own still and make your own stuff. Whereas in the UK and in the States, you're not allowed to. Whereas here, you have to have a license in the UK and the US. Whereas in New Zealand, hey, go for it. Have some fun. Just don't make it too strong, folks. You will go blind. So yeah, will there be? So my initial thoughts were, look, everyone's going to go across to Perth. They'll basically have a bubble in Perth and play the games there. But then the Premier or whatever his name is or whatever his role is in Perth said in Western Australia said, look, we're putting in a 2-week quarantine for people from Australia, and that's that because of that, obviously and he said that initially there was no exemption for the All Blacks. So I don't know if that. Now, I've not seen anything to suggest that's changed. When he was asked would the Rugby Championship games there all happen there, he said it's doubtful, I was like, wow, okay, that's a very strong message there on that one. And so yeah, West Australia has allowed sports teams into the state in strict conditions. Sure, but that's from within Australia. We're talking about teams now coming from South Africa in the Pumas and the Springboks, and from New Zealand with the All Blacks, and that might be a risk too far for them, considering the state of COVID in South Africa, and also the fact that that we've got this lockdown. Boys, have you heard anything else on top of that, or because say Perth doesn't sound sounds like it might be off the cards now? So maybe it has to happen further afield. Maybe they all go to South Africa. Maybe they all go to Europe. Any thoughts?
Oh, who knows? Listen, the Premier is Mark McGowan, and I know that when he was interviewed by journalists, he didn't really give a decisive answer. He was a little bit unsure. I know on Wednesday they were supposed to put out some information where the risk was, what level of risk it was, but I haven't. If they went ahead and played those games, but at this stage we haven't heard anything. So maybe a case of no news is good news.
Yeah, I was actually listening to a press conference with Mark McGowan, particularly to do with the championship. He was very categorical, saying that given that New Zealand has now gone into a lockdown, anyone flying in from New Zealand must go to a 2-week quarantine. So that's probably going to put everything out of whack, because the All Blacks are supposed to leave to Western Australia this Sunday. One thing which I've heard of is one of my contacts at Rugby Pass, Tom Winscombe. I think that he's just put out an article as well that there is talks which are being held as we speak, SANZA and World Rugby, to host the championship in Europe. So they're looking at 4 different cities as well, which is I think London, Paris, Dublin, and obviously Millennium Stadium, Wales. Format of double headers. So all this is, nothing's been confirmed, but obviously there are talks happening because given that anyone flying into Europe via Singapore won't have to isolate or quarantine, so that attraction is there. And of course, you could, imagine, the Box versus the All Blacks, the 100th year, being played place like Twickenham, which will have a full house. So all that revenue, the TV rights, and of course, to our friends, Springbok supporters, playing in Europe will be a much better time zone for them. Unfortunately, we'll have to be watching the games early morning, sort of thing. So I think that's understandable in the professional era. They've got to do what they have to do. But at this stage, looks like Western Australia is probably 99.9% out of the question.
Yeah, and look, if Western Australia is out of the question, the rest of Australia is out of the question as well. Western Australia was the only place there that was really a possibility, as far as I could really see it. To be honest with you, New Zealand now is definitely out of the equation, and I think South Africa also is. So yes, neutral territory in Europe looks like it's going to be the most likely one if the Rugby Championship is to go ahead. And let's be honest, all of these rugby unions are absolutely strapped for cash at the moment, so they have to make these games happen because they just will. Otherwise, they will just go bust. So these games have to happen because they need the TV money. The only question then would be: would they play 9 o'clock in the morning games in Europe so that so that Sky Sports New Zealand has it at the time zone that they want? We'll have to wait and see. Maybe they could play them earlier in the day so that we have an evening game rather than necessarily an early morning game. Talking of early morning games and the Rugby Championship, there is one game this weekend, which is the Springboks versus the Pumas, which will be at 3 a.m. Sunday morning. So let's So I will be up at 3 a.m. to watch that on Sunday morning and giving you post-match reaction to that one. Stephen is shaking his head saying he won't be. This does not surprise me because one of the questions that has do join us. Do join me for that. I think, and probably John with his one-eyed Springbok view for that one. Because he wouldn't pick anybody from the All Blacks on a World 15. So yes, but then again, Bo wouldn't pick anyone who wasn't an All Black from the World 15. So we don't worry, we're balanced on the show. We have our one-eyed All Black supporter and our one-eyed Springbok supporter as well. So it's all good.
I was going to say we're a chip on the block, evenly placed.
No. Hey, I would pick Hooper at number 7, my first choice. So I'm not that one-eyed, you know. So and probably Justin Colby as well. So
sorry, Justin Colby at where?
Oh, first choice winger at 14.
Oh, yeah, I thought I heard you say Cheslin Colby at 12, and I'm like, what? that would be that's an interesting one. Simon's saying, yeah, look, Twickenham has Twickenham has got obviously very good floodlights. They could play any time of the day or night they wanted to be honest with you, noise permitting. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Clearly, 7 p.m. local time is probably what they'll be going for, but which would make it about 7 a.m. our time. But it would be nice to if they did a 7 a.m. game, the 7 p.m. our time. But let's we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Gur or at Stranglemint says, why are people calling the world champions boring and demanding to be entertained, not admiring match-winning strategy in all its forms? Right then. Stephen, you gave us a little shake as to why you're not going to watch the game this Sunday. Do you want to take us away on that one?
Listen, for me, I think it's probably for me. You already know what you're going to get. I mean, so I kind of like to be entertained. You know, one of the reasons why I do like sides that play an attractive brand is just that you're going to get movement. You're going to get bang for your buck. Just with regards to the way the South Africans play, it is winning rugby, and that's what it basically comes back to at the end of the day. But I really, if you ask the question, World Rugby, they've changed the rules around. They've brought in a 50-22 rule, and that's basically to push wingers back. But all of a sudden, most teams that I've seen using that rule are actually looking for the 50-20, which once again takes any sort of ball movement right out of the equation. Yeah, to be honest, they're world champions, and you've got to pay them respect. And they're grinding, because when you consider where they came from, I can recall when they got beaten by 57-0 at Albany, and admittedly it wasn't their strongest combination, and their turnaround has been nothing short of sensational. But it's a tough style of rugby. I know if the boot was on the other shoe and the All Blacks were playing that style of rugby, they'd be copping a whole lot of criticism for playing such a grind style. I can think back to probably Laurie Mains in probably between 93, 94, which he played a style which was pretty much a grind. Yes, there were times they were getting across the line, but it wasn't always pity. But listen, it's not to say they should be given credit. They are getting across the line, and even you could arguably say it was the second string side that they stuck out on the paddock on the weekend. But they're a little bit like the French and New Zealand. They've got a lot of depth across the board. Hell's teeth if the All Blacks stuck out a second string side against the Pumas and got beaten. Do you think anybody would care? I don't think so. It would still be an All Black team for everybody. I can think when the All Blacks didn't take a game seriously in the United States against the Irish in Chicago, where they didn't put what to me was a very understrength side, and they paid the ultimate price.
Yep, it does. You're right. It does. It's at the end of the day, it's the jersey's been worn, and that's the team that's there representing it. Look, one thing to be clear on here, folks. What the Springboks do is not easy. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of skill, and other teams have tried doing it and failed. But they are very good at what they do. They're very well coached what they do, and it is very effective. But it is not necessarily fun to watch when you know what's going to happen. It's going to be a high ball that's contested. They're going to look for a penalty from that. They're going to look to kick, maul, penalty, kick for a line out, more penalty, kick for a line out, more penalty, and score. Now, they've got three of the most attractive and attacking back three players in the world that they just don't use, apart from maybe once or twice a game. And that's, for me, in a lot of sense, it's that knowing that they could do so much more and just not doing it. And it's like painting by numbers. Now, painting by numbers, to get a good picture, you've still got to paint very well, right? But you know what the picture is going to be before you start. Whereas when we look at other teams who don't paint by numbers, you don't know what the picture is going to be, and that's why it's more interesting. What really made this particular series boring was the fact that the Lions played the exact same style back at them, and that was where it got boring. It's because we had two sides doing the same thing, playing paint by numbers. So to me, it wasn't so much that the Springboks were boring; it's that the series was boring. And that when we see the Springboks come up against a different style, then it will be interesting to see which of the two styles wins, who executes that style better. So for me, it's not so much the fact that the Springboks are boring, it's that the series was boring because both sides took a boring style of play. Bo, I can see you want to jump in.
Well, for me, there's two key things. The series was boring, Springboks were boring. Look, gentlemen, I mean, ladies and gentlemen, there is a very important factor, I think, in particular in the professional game, why professional sides need to play attractive rugby. In any sport, the top echelon, if we are to grow the sport, and in this case, if you want to grow the game of rugby union, it has to be attractive to watch. It has to be easy on the eyes. And anyone who knows nothing about rugby, if they're watching a game of rugby the first time, they have to have that, the law of attraction has to be there because they're watching something fast-paced, something which is entertaining, something which is interesting. However, unfortunately, with this particular Lions series, we didn't see that. The ball was live in play for less than 20 minutes in I think the first test. So that's less than one quarter in an 80-minute game. Now, I'll give you a classic example. One of the fastest growing sports in the world is professional unarmed combat sport. It's called mixed martial arts, which is the UFC. At the highest level, when you have top pay-per-view fights, if the people running the show, if they deem that a fight is too boring, I'll guarantee you those two fighters or a particular fighter will never get another chance to be on a major pay-per-view card. That's just the way they look at it. They look at it from an entertainment point of view, eyeballs, and they want to get more new entrants into the sport. So I think from that perspective, it is absolutely paramount that all teams, particularly the professional teams, play entertaining rugby. On the other hand, it was all about getting the W. So end of the day, all which matters is after 80 minutes, what the record shows. The win goes to the Springboks. Doesn't matter how it happens. So it really depends on which side of the coin you subscribe to. I firmly believe that, I like to see fast, open rugby the way it's supposed to be played, where the ball is live in play for more than 40 minutes in a game. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. And, Springboks, when they come up against the All Blacks, hopefully they change tack. Maybe they won't. But I have a feeling all this will come to a head and possibly coming crash down to earth with the Springboks not being able to keep pace with the All Blacks.
Well, that's sorry.
Paul, one thing I will say about the Springboks, so they'll probably be really aware of a lot of the criticism around. It's not via our show as well. If you search a lot of the social networks, they're copying a lot of criticism about their style, and that also might bond them even more and make them more determined. Because let's face it, they have got some real world-class players in their side. I'm staggered when I watch the Curry Cup and just see the amount of talent that they've got running around out wide. Although probably what may have been an eye-opener if you are a South African rugby supporter, a lot of those Currie Cup teams, minus a lot of their top players, man, they were put away quite easy by the Lions. And I just think if the Lions had just been a little bit more adventurous and taken South Africa to some places that they don't want to go, a lot of people will say, man, there were a lot of missed tackles in the Australia All Black game. But that's because the All Blacks will take you to places that you don't want to go to. They will take you wide. They will move you a while around. Guys like Aaron Smith will probe for opportunities. Listen, sometimes it doesn't always come off, especially if another team basically looks them in the eye in the same way as England did in the Rugby World Cup semi-final. I had a lot of respect for the way England played that game because they absolutely shut the All Blacks down. They knew how the All Blacks were going to play, but man alive, they just attacked them in certain areas, and technically they were very good. But with a team like the British Lions, one try that stands out was that try scored that Liam Williams started when the Lions played the All Blacks at Eden Park, and Sean O'Brien scored. Man, that's the sort of rugby they are capable of playing. But you almost get the impression that they're just too gun shy to take a risk at the thought of maybe getting away from their structure, Paul. Is what
you go back and look at that game, and the reason that try happens is because Liam Williams goes to kick and notices he's going to get charged down, I think by Kieran Reid or somebody.
Kieran Reid.
And therefore that option is taken away from him. He wanted to kick, but he had no choice. He had to run. And that led in. So in some ways, Kieran Reid was too good with a kick chase that led to that try. But anyway, you're right. You still need the skills to finish it off. But that wasn't necessarily there. That wasn't the instincts of how they wanted to play. Talking about that, I mean, Boa, you're talking about there against South Africa not being able to live with New Zealand. And I think that's what it's going to come down to, isn't it? Is keeping that ball in play and making the South Africans play as much as possible to tire them out, isn't it? I'm just going to put some wood in the fire while you guys have a quick chat about that, about the upcoming Springboks versus All Blacks.
Yeah, look, no question. One of the key things I'd say is also, if you recall the last Springbok victory in Wellington when they beat the All Blacks, they did so by playing a very fast, open-paced game. So they have the tools, they have the tactics, they have the strategic ability to do that away from home. So for whatever reason, they've become ultra-conservative, and they don't want to be caught up in this trap for too long, because it's not an easy thing to move away from that, because if it's not broke, why change it sort of mentality. So I think this is where the Springboks don't want to be caught in a sense of false security, because let me be very clear, the All Blacks are not the Lions, and the Lions nowhere close to where the All Blacks are at the moment. And the scary thing is the All Blacks will improve from here as well. So it's going to be a bit of a catch-22 for the Springboks. Hopefully they will come to play. They will come to play fast open rugby, and we will actually see a spectacle for the sake of rugby union.
One thing I will say, I think the All Blacks, if they are to play the Springboks, I think they need to go in to a test with 4 quality props. And I think if Moody and Tuangafasi are available, I think you've got to have your best scrummages available if you're going up against the Springboks. I think if you think back to that 2019 World Cup, I think it was a little bit of a mistake to have left. Did they leave Owen Franks home, or they left Carl Tunukuiafia home? They left a couple of key scrummages home. In my ability, international rugby is still about getting your set pieces right, especially that set piece scrum. And boy, I've seen a couple of games in the past where the All Blacks have not always played well, but because they've had a dominant scrum going into that last quarter of the game, it's got them across the line.
It was Owen Franks, I think, we left last time, and you're absolutely right. One thing I do have to say is with the particularly the game against the Boks, the back row is going to have a big impact as well, particularly with those carries, where we will have to be very confrontational and physical. So we make sure that we win the collision and get that fast ball. If we do that successfully, it's game over. I don't think any side in World Rugby can keep up at that pace. And Paul, you alluded to it. It just comes to playing the ball live. More time, ball gets air in hands. No side will be able to keep up with that pace against the All Blacks.
Yeah, John on Twitter said, yeah, how do you think the scrum will fare against South Africa? Which is exactly what you just talked about there, Stephen. Good one there. Now let's switch over to NPC then now for a couple of questions. Now, Fran Wilder asked, why is Wairarapa the only region without an NPC team? Well, they do have an NPC team. It's in the Heartland Championship, so I don't know why we had that question, but there we go. But Fran Wilder also asked why the Magpies coaches from last year didn't get a gig at a Super Rugby franchise. Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question there. Both Mark Ozich and Josh Sims are pretty young coaches. Excuse me, in the scheme of things. I think this year was looking to be a really, really big test because I think what they've basically shown in recent seasons, they're a good championship team. But I think this year was going to be the real test. You've seen that with Clayton McMillan, where he brought Bay of Plenty up as the winning team. And they just seem to have, and whilst they've got a new coach under Daryl Gibson, is it? He's the new coach for the Bay of Plenty Steamers. They don't seem to be missing too much of a beat at the moment, because once you get into that premiership, I think you've got to show that you're capable of going the next step. So with Bay of Plenty, what they did, they boosted their roster. You saw that by they bring in Onisi Ratavu, the Fijian winger, who I understand Fiji did not cap, so he could end up picking up a super contract on Hawke's Bay. It's a real big one. It's a big one for me, for them this year, as far as I'm concerned, because they're probably, out of the teams that I've watched so far, and I know they got a good win over Otago. It was at the weekend. They're probably the likely candidate to drop down. I would have said Waikato a week ago, but then Waikato's gone and turned it around. But they are good coaches. I just think they just got to bide their time a little bit. But I think somewhere in the system, the likes of Ozich will get an opportunity. Maybe coaching the development team, as did Dale McLeod, who coached the Highlanders development squad this year.
Yeah, it's a very competitive space, high performance coaching at first class level in New Zealand. We only got 5 franchises. You're looking at anywhere between 20 to 25 coaches. So, the cream of the crop. It's a very, very competitive space. And also, one thing I have to say is, with what's been happening over the last couple of years, particularly with COVID, we're actually seeing a lot of good coaching talent coming back into New Zealand. So this competitive space is now super competitive. It is ultra competitive. A good example is this year's NPC Manawatu coach, Pete Russell, coming back into the high performance coaching space in New Zealand. So, we're seeing some real high caliber quality people. So you're absolutely right, Stephen. It's just about biding time. And of course, the selection criteria, which is set out by NZR for the Super Rugby franchise. And then keep in mind, we have club coaches from within the province trying to step up to the NPC level. But there are now prerequisites. If you want to coach at first class or Super Rugby level, you have to have equivalent experience, potentially overseas. So it's not as easy as it may seem, and just because you have good success at NPC, it is not a guaranteed success ticket or ticket to success in Super Rugby. And one thing I have to say is it's from NZR, as well as the individual high performance selection criteria for coaches. They've got it pretty much right. So it's a very, very competitive space. Most of these coaches, they shouldn't be disheartened. They will get the opportunity. And, it's an evolving space. So experience, skills, innovation, and of course, overseas experience. And you got to do your time. You do your time, you will get an opportunity. That's just how it works.
I got to say that if you think Razor came through the under-20s, the All Blacks and the 20s, or the Baby Blacks. You've got Clayton McMillan's come through the Maori All Blacks. So I think that's what they need to be looking at, is one of those kind of areas And I think that's part of the pathway into Super Rugby coaching. Is if you want to be a head coach anyway. And you got people like I've just gone blank as the attack coach for the Chiefs. Used to be a Waikato record try scorer.
Roger Randall.
Roger Randall, thank you.
Roger Randall.
He came through by just being a Waikato attack coach, and then a Chiefs attack coach. But he's not trying to be a head coach. Now you want to be. I think if you want to be a head coach, then you expect then there's more requirements before you get those opportunities than if you want to be an assistant coach.
Paul, I was going to say even some experienced club coach, even some very good professional coaches have gone back to grassroots. Colin Cooper has returned to grassroots, and he's coaching Clifton, for crying out loud. What a quality coach they've got at the moment. Auckland B is being coached by Greg Aldous, former Counties Manukau coach at the moment. And boy, there's some talent running around in that Auckland B team as well. Crazy. Look out for a team by the name of...
So Colin, back to Taranaki Club Rugby. We've got an ex-international coach and ex-Counties Manukau coach coaching, was he at Marist in Auckland from memory?
Daryl Suasua.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So Suasua, ex Black Ferns coach as well. You say there are some. Wayne Smith is going to be assistant coach at Waihi next year. There are some very, very good coaches kicking around in club rugby.
Along with Paul Baines.
Paul Baines as the analyst.
And you gotta understand, being a head coach is actually very risky because it's your neck at the end of the line if you don't deliver the results. One of the most safest spaces is being an assistant coach or something like what I do, technical advisor, because you're lesser likely to be the scapegoat of an unsuccessful season. And you can always say, hey, look, if they did what I told them to do, it would have been a very different outcome. So just putting out as well.
Hey, Paul, there's a classic saying from a former New Zealand Rugby League coach who was a legend, Graham Lowe. Absolute legend and top guy, motivator, speaker. But he coined the saying, there are coaches and there are coaches waiting to be sacked.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No. All coaches are waiting to be sacked. Let's be honest.
Gents, not many people may know this. Scott Razor Robertson started his coaching career at the Sumner under 8 age grade. That's right, Sumner under 8 age grade. And he is now regarded as one of the most innovative and most, arguably one of the smartest rugby minds going out there in world rugby. So there you go.
So there we go. So Aaron, Ashwin, who has been a regular on the show, we haven't seen for a while, to be honest. But as he's doing his the under 9s at Suburbs, maybe he is the next All Blacks head coach in the waiting, or future All Blacks head coach in the waiting. We'll have to wait and see.
There's only one problem there. Nobody from south of the Bombays will ever get selected for the All Black team.
Well, there is a lot of support with regards to coach developer, coach educator. It's an area which I have a lot of passion for, and which I spend a bit of time as a volunteer with NZR. So there's all those things in place. So it's really nice to see. Like, for example, with some of the NPC coaches who are running around, and club grassroots. We had Bradley Mika, who was coaching overseas in Malaysia, and he's come back to coach Papatoi at Club Premier Grade. So we're going to see more and more high quality talent coming back. It's going to become a super, super competitive space, which is all the better for New Zealand rugby.
Yeah, you use one word in there that is a barrier, that makes it a barrier to some people, and that's the word volunteer. Is that if you can't afford to volunteer because you need to be earning money from other places, and you can't dedicate the time to it, then unfortunately you're going to miss out. Because it is such a sought after and something that people want to do, people will do it for free to get themselves on the ladder. And if you can't do that, then unfortunately you're going to struggle. You're not going to get on the ladder at the bottom ladder on a living wage, unfortunately. unless you're an ex-player. Mr. Joey Nanai on Twitter with a bit of a heavy one here. He says he wants us to talk about the mistreatment of fringe players by unions around the country. Ouch. I'm not sure if he's got any particular names in mind with that one. I think one of the things that does cause, particularly club rugby fans and provincial rugby fans, rather than necessarily the fans who are sort of casual fans of the NPC, a lot of angst, is multi-year contracts. Is that historically your NPC was the best players from club rugby, and that you earned your place in the NPC team every year. Nowadays, you can enter the club season with players knowing there's only 2 or 3 spots up for grabs potentially in the NPC squad because of multi-year contracts. Now, from a player's point of view, you totally understand it. The certainty around having a multi-year contract is massive. Rather than all you have to do is break your leg in an early club game, and you can be coming back at the end of the club season, and hey presto, your season's gone. Whereas with a multi-year contract, you can come back and you can still play NPC and you can still earn your wage. So maybe that's where he's coming at it from. But Stephen, your thoughts on how provinces treat players and especially fringe players and the expectations put upon them, maybe.
Well, the first thing I'll say, selection is in the eye of the beholder. For starters, yes. whoever the head coach is, basically he's only seeing through his eyes, and there's probably a whole lot of tick boxes that goes with a player that you're looking at club level. It's not just the player's form, it's how the player is as a person, whether they attend HP camps. So there's a whole lot of little tick boxes that go along the way. But listen, I've gleaned some information from a particular provincial union, and I won't say who it is, and it's actually not Northern that I can confirm with you, but I think it's just a really, really great idea. Where, say for example, if a player is given his first contract for his first year, and that contract per se is $23,000, the player is pretty much told if they have a strong first season, that contract gets bumped up for the next season, maybe to 25 or 28,000, and in that second year, if they pick up a super contract, the union will pay overs for that particular contract. And I know of a union that's actually doing that at the moment. Now that's a 3-year deal, but with the option, if the player doesn't pick those boxes, they can actually pull that contract. And I just think it's a great idea, because sometimes you can get a situation where a player does get signed for maybe 2 or 3 seasons and maybe doesn't quite hit that level. You know, your expectation second, first, at least by the second year, they should be looking to hit a super rugby contract. And listen, I fully take my hat off to that union. I'll tell you guys who it is once the show's finished, just to basically keep things a little bit secret. But I think it's a great idea.
I've got a very good idea which union it is. So, but anyway, that's I won't speculate. But yeah, no, exactly. I mean, one of the things in cycling is another sport that I really enjoy, and a lot of cyclists get 2-year contracts. And one of the things you'll hear journalists talk about is, oh yes, he's in his final year of his contract, and suddenly they up their game because they're trying to earn the next contract. So yes, there is an element there of perhaps people become complacent. Now we're talking their proper salaries, unlike the look. Let's be honest, living off 20k a year is not easy. I kind of know. So look, that's not a kind of really a living. That's not a full-time wage. You've got to have another job outside of that. But then again, it's only a 12-week season. So add in a month or 2 of pre-season, and it's you're getting paid for 5 to 6 months worth of work. So it's understandable that it's not a full 12-year salary, 12-month salary in that as well. But yes. Your thoughts on this topic, Bar?
Well, look, the reality is with the evolution of open professionalism, this is always going to be one of those prickly little issues, particularly with players who are looking to transition from club premier grade to NPC level. So I think one of the things, rather than sort of dwell too much on the problem or the issue, what I would like to talk about and what I would like to do is actually discuss a solution, which is looking at, particularly at Super Rugby level, limiting how many players a particular franchise can draft from outside their home unions. Because by actually doing that, you're giving your local pool of players a better chance of getting selection for first class, i.e. professional contracts. And then that streamlines the whole NPC to Super Rugby link. For example, with the Blues, there are three key provincial unions, which is Northland, Auckland, and slipped my mind, and North Harbour, beg your pardon. Yeah. So those three unions. So, if say, for example, if the Blues if there was a rule saying that the Blues have to pick 95% of their players from within those three provincial unions, and you can only have 5% of players from outside, it's going to significantly change the landscape for the better of the local provincial union players. Thereby, you will see most of these fringe players who transition from club rugby to NPC will actually stick around a bit longer, because what we're actually seeing at the moment, gentlemen, is that we're seeing most of these fringe players who are sort of there or thereabouts, really good club premier grade players. They tend to go overseas, not necessarily play top level rugby, but rugby at a level where they will get something financially, but they see that as a better option because they understand as a fringe player, they're never going to make it past it. So I think from a strategic point of view, that needs to happen. And then the provincial unions and their administrators need to align themselves with that strategic direction. But that's the ideal world. But the reality is, every union wants to win. They want to do well because it has a knock-on effect. And of course, there's huge pressure from the coaching staff. If for example, if you tell the Auckland coaches, look, you can have anyone you want, they would stack themselves 1 to 15 with quality players, not necessarily from within the Auckland Union, but from wherever they can find and recruit, where they can afford the coin as well. So it's not a simple issue. It is somewhat of a complex issue, but I think medium to long term, if I was an administrator, that's what I'd be doing. I would want to encourage a streamlined system where local players from club rugby transition successfully through the tiers from NPC to Super Rugby, and then hopefully we will see these fringe players get a better deal.
Well, I think you by doing that, you'd ruin the Highlanders' entire recruitment policy, in particular. But it's different for the Highlanders, where you've got two provinces under you, unlike the Chiefs, who have got 5 under them. The Chiefs with Counties Manukau, Waikato, Taranaki, Bay of Plenty, and is it only 4? Maybe it's 4 then. But they've got 4 under them. Whereas you look at the Highlanders, they've got Otago and Southland. Southland, who are improving, but if you look at them over the last 5 years, have had seasons where they'll win 1, maybe 2 games. That cannot, and you can't put together a Super Rugby side from those two provinces. So they would need some dispensation being down there, or they would have to take on someone like Taranaki. Look, it's already been part of 2 Super Rugby franchises. They could change to the Highlanders next, taking a 3rd one, and make their way all the way around it. Look, I remember seeing tweets out from Auckland Rugby saying, "Hey, good luck to our players who are playing in all 5 of the Super Rugby franchises this weekend." So yeah, it is that's that alignment between the provinces and Super Rugby franchises is not there from a playing point of view. It is from a administrative and a coaching point of view. Where resources, particularly around the things like performance analysis, etc., there'll be computers, cameras, and stuff handed down and spread out around the provinces. That's there, but it's not so at the playing level. You're quite right. Alternative Right says, yeah, the market is not supporting the model, has to be changed, but I don't know. I don't have a solution. To me, the solution is better, is around better marketing, a better connection with the community around the NPC. And to me, that's the main thing. And to try and now, to be fair to New Zealand Rugby, they are, and I think Sky Rugby, Sky has also realised this. People buy Sky TV for Super Rugby for the All Blacks. They don't buy it on the whole for the NPC, or at least in numbers. And hence that's why you've seen games for this season for the first time in quite a few years being played at the same time. So we've got 2 games on a Saturday, 2 games on a Sunday at the same time because it's becoming more about the fans in the ground than the TV, or at least the balance between TV audience and ground and attendance is rebalancing a bit towards people actually turning up to the games rather than it just being about when TV needs to fill its channels, which is what we've seen with the Thursday night games. I think Wednesday night games we had as well, didn't we? Not that long ago. So that balance is definitely coming back. As Simon says, not charging $30 for a game. Yep, true. Look, around charging, it's difficult. We discussed this a bit on Tuesday night with the All Blacks second test match about what price you charge. But if you make something free, you make it feel less valuable and less worthwhile. By putting a price on it, you make it feel more valuable, people more and give it more value. So you have to be careful with your charging, is to make it not seem like a freebie that's not worth watching, but also not blocking particularly large families from going because it's too expensive. It's a balancing act.
The easiest thing, the easiest thing is to see if we can transition supporters of club rugby into NPC. So by having more club players transition, and this goes for everyone, it goes for administrators, coaches, whatever. By doing that, it's going to be a lot more easy to engage the community. It's a very simple change, which I think is inevitable. So we'll see how things pan out over the next season or two.
I like what Taranaki did by taking that game to Pukekura Park. I think there's an opportunity for Wellington to go to Jerry Collins Stadium. I think there's, and even here in Auckland, I think there's an opportunity for Auckland Rugby to either go to Western Springs or out west here to Waitakere Stadium. I mean, so these are quite, boutique little grounds. Get your community, get the local clubs involved with putting the food together. I realise there's a lot of tick boxes in and around sponsors and also food suppliers at Eden Park. I know Eden Park had just changed, about to change their caterer. Their long-time caterer Spotless is being moved on. I think that's no great scoop or anything. It's words going around. But yeah, I just think you've got to, Paul, you hit it on the head. You just got to think outside the square.
Yeah, and had an interesting interview that I released today with Aaron Lawton, the CEO of Counties Manukau. And one of the things we talk about is Navigation Home Stadium, which now I've not been to every single ground in the NPC, but I have been to everything north of Manawatu, including Manawatu. And it is well, you say boutique, but it's definitely it's the most rural stadium in some ways in the way it's built. It definitely needs. It's definitely not 21st century standard by any stretch. But he talks about how he's not going to put money into something that doesn't get a return at the end of the day, and that that he's not going to, and that it's about that whatever money goes into it has to come back out of it several fold because it's being used. Putting in, it's the. When is the last time, Boa, you saw a Cathay Ray Tube TV?
I can't recall.
Right, that's what we have in the media box in Counties in Navigation Home Stadium. it gives you an idea. So yeah, look, they're not wasting money on a flat screen TV for the media to get to be able to watch replays, even though there's no big screen in the ground, for example. So and that's how tight things are there, and how it is as I say, it's look, it's a lovely ground. It feels more homely. It has more character than the majority of grounds around the country, but that's it's balancing out between being, well, yeah, I love it because, yeah, as I say, it feels like you're putting on a nice warm coat at the beginning of each NPC season, whereas going into Eden Park, you don't get that same feeling. It's not like putting on a nice that old coat, but the but yeah, as Simon makes, there has to be a minimum standard of grounds. Yes, there does, absolutely, and currently it has it, but it does need to. I'll and Boa, you'll be surprised at this one. So I've never. One of the things I would like to do is to see what a HIA assessment is. But my understanding that part of it includes walking in a straight line on a line. The only reason I know this is because at Counties at Navigation Home Stadium, the medical room is too small, and so they have a piece of tape in the corridor, and you see the players walking up and down that piece of tape in the corridor, doing their post-match HIAs. So things like that, it's just not up to modern standards. But it's just not worth at the moment. It wouldn't get the return to taking that money away from.
Here's something interesting now that we're on the topic. Is I recall a couple of years back, I was part of the COD, which is a chair of delegates for Auckland Rugby, representing my club, Manukau Rowers. When it came to hosting a Gala final, something which interesting was put forward by Auckland Rugby is that they said that it actually costs more to host a major game at a smaller boutique ground, for a better choice of words, than in a large stadium. And one of the reasons was that they have to get the facilities, i.e. the parking, X amount of toilets, catering, and all the other infrastructure up to scratch. And some of these grounds don't necessarily have it. But this brought I understand, a big uproar from the delegates because, in the community game, when you play in a village park sort of Esplanade style stadium, you can actually smell the wet grass from the sidelines. That's the experience which the community comes up for. So there's a whole raft of things, particularly in the modern day. So, everything complies with health and safety and all these other boxes they need to tick. So it's a lot more complex than we actually think. But that's the reality. So, I doubt we're going to see more games being played at smaller venues. If at all, it's only going to get bigger. And if they don't market this thing properly, it's going to be half-empty stadiums. It's going to be playing rugby in ghost town.
Well, I think some of the provinces will be moving out of their big stadiums because I do think it costs too much for them currently. And actually, so maybe the way that Auckland Rugby works with the local council, particularly, and with the Eden Park, that it is cost effective. Waikato, so I know from offhand comments that putting on the second big screen costs $10,000 for one game, just to turn it on. It's there, but to turn it on costs $10,000. So that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like Waikato move out of FMG Stadium in the next couple of years. Who knows? I've no idea what the deals are like down in Wellington or down in Dunedin, and how well the provinces and the councils work with, or the stadiums work with each other there. But yeah, that's I think some of them are more expensive. But you're quite right. There is a cost to going to small stadiums. Look, guys, we've been going for an hour and 10, so I think it's probably time for us to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody who has taken part during the live chat. Thank you, everybody who gave us questions on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Don't forget, you can always listen to this as a podcast as well We'll be back on Tuesday at 8 p.m. with DrivingMaul Show, and I'll be back at about 5 a.m. in the morning on Sunday morning with post-match reaction to the Springboks versus the Pumas. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Let's do lockdown properly, and let's come out the other side healthy. Thank you, Boa. Thank you, Stephen.